Hey, hey. This week's episode is a little different. And actually, over the next 6 weeks, we are going to be doing something a little bit different because, as usual, I am walking my talk. And because I have so much going on behind the scenes right now, for those of you who, haven't heard, I'm about to launch a new Oracle deck, the Kismet Codes Part 1. And there is a new book coming and a new course and all sorts of new, lots of back-end stuff happening. And I need a break from recording the podcast. So I'm taking that and I'm going to highlight some of my favourite episodes from season 1 of Adulting with Ebony and give you a kind of where are they now in the patron part. So this week's guest is Marianne Cantwell. Marianne is the founder of Free Range Humans. She gave the TEDx Talk, The Hidden Power of Not Always Fitting In, which has now been viewed over 500,000 times. And she is also the best-selling author of the book Be a Free Range Human, which was re-released or had a heavily revised second edition back in 2019. And I'm going to spill the tea on where she is now and what's going on in her world now in the patron part. But for now, enjoy this episode. You are listening to Adulting with Ebony. Season 7 brings together neurodiversity, human design and embodiment so that Gen X or millennial misfits and late diagnosed neurospices become empowered, embodied and fully expressed. This is the show where I actively encourage you to feel your feelings rather than think them. Glow up, not grow up, and become full of yourself. Because who the fuck else should you be full of? Each week, I have real and raw conversations about what it takes to be fully resourced and have happy, healthy, intimate relationships as a dopamine-deficient adult wanting to create a better future by being the change that you want to see in the world. I am your host, Ebony Allard, aka Ebony Alchemy, a late diagnosed ADHDer, combined type and Asperger's in case you like specifics, artist, mystic, and self-actualization facilitator. I'm an international award-winning multiple brain integration technique master coach with special interest in embodied human design for neurodivergence. I've been in the personal development, creativity, and entrepreneurship spaces all of my life. And as a 5'2" emotional manifesting generator with a left angle cross of distraction, I am here to help you know what to trust and what to tune out. Each week, I share relatable, practical ways that mean you get to take less responsibility for more reward and safely remove your camouflage for more belonging, acceptance, and fulfillment. Ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today I'm joined by Marianne Cantwell. Marianne is the founder of Free Range Humans. She gave the TEDx Talk, The Hidden Power of Not Always Fitting In, which has been viewed by over 250,000 people. And she's also the author of the best-selling book, Be a Free Range Human, featured in The Guardian, Business Week. And it's more about finding your right direction and making it work for you so that you don't have to fit yourself into someone else's box in order to get paid. And it's recently been heavily revised in a second edition. And I'm really excited to have Marianne here. Those who know me will know that we're very much aligned and this is going to be a fun chat. Hey, Marianne.
Hello, I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. What does being an adult mean to you?
There's this cartoon that I absolutely love, and I think it's by XKCD, which is the geekiest cartoon on the planet. And it's this picture of this guy opening a door, and there's a girl who has filled the entire apartment with playpen balls, and she's laying on it, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well, I'm an adult now, and we get to decide what that means." And I had that cartoon cut out of a newspaper and put like everywhere I moved for years and years. We're a grown up now and we get to decide what that means.
I love that so much, like so much more than you know. When I first moved out, I moved to London when I was 17, and the first night in my new flat, I had chocolate for my evening meal. And my housemate was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm an adult now. I can eat whatever I want for dinner and I'm having chocolate."
Yep.
And you know what? Like, you do that for a couple of days, and at some point your body goes, "Can I have broccoli, please?" And you're like, "Right, I'm an adult, and now I'm going to have broccoli, please."
Agreed completely. And my favorite food, weirdly, is kale. I'm really into it. It turns out as an adult, decisions take different paths.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I think that's a really interesting point to go in on, right? So you've just done the second edition, or it's a while ago now, but you've done the second edition. And how has your relationship to being a free range human changed?
Really, so much, so much. Funnily enough, I sometimes think of being a free range human like actually being a real adult, because you don't have mum and dad in the form of a boss. You don't have a glorified version of school, which is the office. When I first became my own boss, became what I call a free range human, I had to learn how to be an adult in a new way, above and beyond anything I ever knew. And now I'm so many years into that my relationship with it is completely different. Now, I think so much more of it for me is about making decisions that maybe don't look as good on the outside, but feel right to me, in a way that I don't think I realized I wasn't doing at the start, but I don't think I was. So I think it's become a lot more internal than external.
Yeah. There's so many things I want to say about that. Like, my journey was so similar. And like, for me, the reason I talk about adulting to people who are predominantly wanting to create a life that is less ordinary. And people always say to me, why don't you just call yourself a business coach? And why don't you just say that you work for people who are like freelance or like doing their own thing? And I'm like, because some of those people that isn't right for. Some of them, to be a free range human also means contracting or like disrupting the workplace and having a more traditional career. And I'm not going to say you must come and separate and segregate yourself over here. It's like, actually, as a free range human, or what I deem a kick-ass and kind human, is someone who is really grounded in themselves and able to shift and change their identity as they evolve and grow without going, well, I said I was this, so now I have to be this forever.
Oh my God, we're speaking the same language. Something I really struggled with when the first edition of the book came out was that I do these press interviews and people are like, so do you think everyone should be their own boss? I'm like, I literally don't care if anyone's their own boss. That is completely not the point of what I do. It's a vessel for self-development. It's a vessel for a form of freedom. So many people read my book and go through our courses and realize something else about their life needs to change. And that is fantastic. I'm not an evangelist for one form of life, just like you. And there's this line I share in there, which is that true freedom is the freedom to dance with the changes that will come your way. Because it's that groundedness. It's a lot we can learn from entrepreneurship that we can bring to our day-to-day existence, no matter what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I have full body goosebumps, and like, it's just so true for me. People come into our programs and they're like, but I don't have a business. Is this relevant to me? I'm like, just do the exercises anyway and see what happens, right? Like, you are a personal brand. The way society exists right now, whether you are in a job or not, doesn't matter. You're still a personal brand, right? And how you come across and the values that you have and what you believe about them and how you express that is relevant to anyone, in my opinion.
Completely agree.
So I guess it's interesting, isn't it, when you're like, yes, we agree. Have you come across anyone who doesn't agree with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, most of the online business world, I'd say, disagrees on the idea of there not just being one right way to do life. I mean, go on your Facebook feed, look at your ads. If you've ever clicked on anything to do with online business, you'll be targeted with them about freedom is meant to look this way. And something that really got to me, so I was at the very beginning of the, I remember the time I put create life on your terms. I made that line up and put it on my header, and now it's all over the internet. So I don't even use that anymore. But at the time, it was a very different space when I started. And there wasn't different tribes or anything. It was just very much either you're in a job or you're in a very boring business or a freelancer. And there was no middle ground of creativity, of self-expression. Not that was more than being, it wasn't more than a hobby. It wasn't like this movement. And today, I think we've gone from that not existing to seeing people go from being in a job or a traditional business to trying to get something more, to feeling that gap and trying to fill it, and ending up trying to fill it by being a version of someone else they're seeing on the internet, which would be nice if it worked, but it doesn't, because then we end up feeling not enough. We end up in comparison land. We end up in exactly the same cycle, but this time we can't complain because there's no boss to blame. And that are the people where I tend to have a slight disagreement with, that life on your terms can look any way that you want it to. And it doesn't have to look the same this year as it will in 10 years. And it doesn't have to look the same for me as it will for you.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that just come up as you were speaking then. So I've always talked about living an out of the box life, right? And like, actually, what does that mean for you? What does it what does it look like to live out of the box? But the problem that most people have is that they've got that they're not used to having no guidelines, right? So they build something that is exactly this, like, is a customized version of the same box. So instead of having the box that they went to and they had to show up at a certain time and dress a certain way and talk a certain way, they created another one exactly the same, but this time it's polka dotted and they're allowed to wear what they want and say what they want, but it's exactly the same bloody box, right, as it was before. But it's very hard to build completely off the peg because you've got too many fucking options and you don't know what to do. Yes. And that's really scary for people.
And I think there's nothing wrong with starting out. Like, I used to, at university, one of the modules I took, or the class I took, was creative writing. And something that we did in creative writing was we learned how to do a pastiche of other people's styles. And one of the best ways to learn how to write, when you don't even know what your style is when you're a young student, is, we do these exercises. We'd take 5 authors and we'd write a piece in their style, and you learn so much. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that as a learning tool. I'm trying on this outfit because I saw it, someone else wearing it. It doesn't mean it's going to suit me perfectly. I'm going to see if that's the sort of thing I like. And so in the experimenting phase, that's great. But I think the thing that's often missed is that that's not all there is. It's what you said before is so resonant. It's that sense of groundedness. So while we're experimenting, while we're trying on shiny things, is developing a sense of an internal GPS, as I call it, an internal reference, so that we start to know, something I had to work on over the years for me. How do I know which piece of this is me? And how do I know which piece of this is going to be another box? And it's just this sense of an iteration over time. But the one, I think, practical thing we can all do is to be very aware of the dangers of tribalism. Of diving from, I always see it as you dive from a world of being a conformist, or being in a world of conformists, to a world of non-conformists. And the danger of that is that if your identity gets tied, and I've seen this happen again and again, to being a rebel, a term which I don't use and I don't identify with, or being a non-conformist, it's a reaction against. And if you're reacting against, you're as constricted as those who are reacting within. If they wear black, you wear white. If they say yes, you say no. If they want a permanent home, you have to travel. And suddenly you're in a box. And that box can be great and the polka dots can be fun, but soon they're not. And so the game for me, and for real free-range humans, is to be able to dive in between those worlds. To say, you know what? The nonconformist world has some really great stuff. This business has some really great stuff. This way of approaching it has some really great stuff. And for me, who I am today, I'm going to take 20% from this. And actually, you know what? I really like some stuff I used to do. I'm going to bring that in. And that's where leaders come from. They don't sit there and copy 100%, but they also don't go, I need to reinvent the wheel. They go, I'm going to borrow. And I started talking to a lot of people in leadership roles, and it was like this: I'm going to borrow this and borrow that. And that I think is where we end up with something that just feels really right and actually stands out.
I agree. I mean, the amount of times people say, when I say misfit, they say rebel. And I'm like, I actually need to catch you on that, because there's a very big difference between being a misfit and being a rebel. And being a rebel is reactionary, and being a rebel is what you do when you have something to prove. And a misfit has nothing to prove. Like, they exist in their own little world in the liminal spaces. The hardest part about that is that you really have to be willing to go into your own identity and say, hey, maybe home isn't an external thing. Maybe home is something, and belonging is something that I'll only ever find within me. And that's terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's like we're speaking such the same language, and I think it's a very important conversation to have. I remember over time, over the years, and I'm sure you've had this as well, as I used to have a lot of press for, say, traveling the world, which I don't do as much of now, though I am in the States as we talk, but not in a sort of like moving every 3 months way. And people would come up with these assumptions about things I would and wouldn't approve of, in a sense of, oh, well, I'm buying a home. Oh, you wouldn't like that. You wouldn't approve of that. And I was like, why on earth? Like, I actually own my own home in London. I'm really into interior design, as it turns out. Like, why would we make these assumptions and put ourselves in a box? And something I found really freeing for so many people as I've talked to them over the years is being able to having these moments where you stand out and say something that people don't expect. So it might be someone talks about something that feels a little bit more traditional, and you're like, that sounds awesome. And they're like, I wouldn't expect that. And it's like, well, I think that a decision that's made because it fits you is more powerful than a decision made because someone looking shiny on the internet was making it. And I find that it gives people a lot more freedom, because it's so obvious and we all nod in the moment, but when it comes to the crunch, do we actually do it?
Yeah, it's something you said at the beginning. So, and I'm really curious about this. When you were starting out, just as the book was being published and around that kind of time, I was just also starting out in internet land and like running my own business and moving from film and TV like into this world. And I was not, I hadn't done the work yet. Right. And I didn't have that inner confidence or that inner knowing or that inner understanding. And I believed that anyone like me was competition and wouldn't be my friend and would just tell me to go away. And I didn't have this, like, I had no idea. Like, now, if I was just starting out, and if we were back there then and I discovered you and you were just starting out and I was just also starting out, I'd be like, hi, you're amazing. Like, can we play? But actually then I would have gone, oh, she's doing it already. Like, there's no space for me. And I know that my own growth in business was hugely slowed down by the personal work I needed to do in order to find myself and be okay with who I was. And I'm interested what it was that gave you perhaps the confidence or the boost or the surety to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I didn't have any other choice. So I quit my job in a recession, which was a great way, by the way, of learning how to run your own business, because you can't ride a wave. There's no trend that's going to carry you, and people don't like to pay money for anything. So people who started around when I started, they're often the big people you see today, because we learned. We didn't ride a trend. We really, really learned what mattered. And I really would have struggled to go back into a job then. So I think I had to learn. I had to support myself. I didn't have a backup plan. So I think that gives you a lot of confidence. Second thing was, it's interesting what you say about competition. I had that at the beginning, but I was very, very lucky that very soon I started meeting people, even though I knew no one who was their own boss when I started. And every week I would meet up with 2 other people who I'd met and who were my biggest competitors in the UK. And we grew together. And we learned each other's strengths, and we separated almost the market together. And today we're doing, well, one of them's actually still a very close colleague of mine, is all through my book, but we're doing very different things. And that is what boosted me. I had these 2 people I could have fought it out with, and instead we grew together. I don't think we'd have been here without each other. Even though now it's very different. And I think that was the difference.
I can totally see that. So I started my first business at exactly that time. So it was 2009, like 2007 to 2009, when I kind of left the film industry. And I started a business called My Girl Friday, which was one of the first personal assistant, virtual assistant businesses back then. And I didn't have the confidence to be a coach. I didn't even really know what coaching was. I definitely didn't have my own voice and couldn't have written my book yet. And so, within 3 years that we were winning awards, I had 17 freelancers working for us. We had this global business, but I was miserable because I'd run down a track of should do's, right? Like, this is how you're supposed to run a business. This is how I'm supposed to show up. And I built that gilded cage, right? Like I did the exact thing that I tell people, watch out for this now. And when I then crashed and burned properly in 2011, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I actually was forced to go, okay, let's not just build a business that the world needs. Like, who do I want to be? What does true freedom look like to me? And when I then did my coaching diploma, I met two people who I'm still good friends with now, who are doing incredibly well in the space. And we came together and just really supported each other and had each other's back. And community is so vital if you want to succeed.
It's interesting hearing what you say. My crash was 2014 after the book came out. And for me, it was very nuanced, because it wasn't the usual story you hear of, I built this business and it, either overwhelmed me in terms of time. It was running itself, right? And I created it where I could explicitly be myself. Like, I was like, what is wrong with me? Why am I crashing? I loved the work I did, but I just didn't want to do anything. I realized I had a year of depression that I didn't identify till afterwards. So very, very deep depression. And I didn't know what happened. I had a best-selling book. I had a business that I could literally do anything with, the best followers in the world who would have done anything I could imagine, where they would be like all up for it. And I was massively depressed. And I went to this event one day in Bali, and the person leading it said, like, with the whole room, was like, who are you? Who would you be without your business? Describe who you are. And I got so pissed off. I was like, but I am Free Range Humans. And I had over-identified with my brand and my book to an extent that I didn't know where I ended and it began anymore. And even if I took, I take 3 months off at a time, I was still Free Range Humans, even if I wasn't doing the work. And so I think it actually took me years of work, including going to a jungle in Peru and doing plant medicine and with like shaman in the middle of the Amazon. It took me a lot of personal work to be able to separate from this creature that I had made and I loved. And I always see it as, I think we all have phases in our businesses or our careers. And the first phase for me of Free Range Humans, and the first edition, was it was a baby. I always called it my book baby, and it was a toddler, and then it became a teenager, and I was its mum, and I didn't know how to let it be a teenager. And so I had to go away. I had to separate. We shut down courses. Like, people didn't even know this. No one saw it. We closed down our marketing funnels, even though the brand was there. We pulled almost all the courses just quietly. And luckily, the passive income just kept coming in from what was left. And I had to learn how to be me. That's when I did my TED Talk, The Hidden Power of Not Always Fitting In, which was something no one expected me to give except those who knew me the best, who were all like, of course you're giving that talk, as literally as you. And now with the second edition of the book, I was able to come back, and, we just released it this year. And in this release, even though I'm giving it as much love and as much support, I believe in this edition more than I believe in the first, like so much more. I really, really believe in it. It's not me. It is a piece of me that I have put into a book, and it will exist separately from me. And I think and I don't say this to say, oh my gosh, when you start your own business, don't over-identify. I say, just be aware that there will come a phase where you might question it. And at that point, maybe it's not wrong. Maybe you just need to change your relationship to it. And for me, it's just in everything to know I am here and it is there.
I feel that, by the way. You feel different now than you did the first time around.
Completely. Yeah.
There's your business has an identity and you have one. And I really remember with My Girl Friday, like, the persona of that business was a kind of sassy Mary Poppins who was adulting the fuck out of life, right? Like, who had her shit together. But do you know how hard it was to maintain that 100% of the time? It's exhausting, right?
I do know how hard it was. There's come to this point where, I don't know if you found this, for the first few years of my business, because I was writing an email newsletter every week. So I was storytelling my life and my thinking every week in thousands of words to thousands of people. Great way to have a personal crisis, by the way. Do that for 5 years. A lot to say about that. Don't have time. But for the first few years, it was completely me. But then there came a point where I thought who I was evolving into was evolving too far away from my readers. And so all I could do was replay old me.
Yeah.
I didn't think new me had value. New me was nuanced. New me was different. And that, I think, is a danger point. What happens when you evolve past who you were? And that's where we have to, make these decisions. And I don't think it means that what we did before was wrong. Like, I still think the early Free Range Humans was great, and it was me back then. But then me a few years ago and today are different. And it's the same for all of us. And we have to... This is why what you were saying at the beginning is so important. If we don't do the self-development work, you can ride a wave and you'll hit a wall and you've got a good 2 to 3 years. If you want to be in business and love what you do long term, you've got to do the work while you're riding the wave.
I couldn't agree more, like, in every single way. And I think it's really important that we have these conversations, because I think there's too many people who don't understand that this is going on behind the scenes, right? Like, I had this whole thing for years that part of the misfit identity is an energy of kind of hard done by and like not successful and haven't made it yet, right? Like, there's a quality of energy to that. So every time in my business life has become easy, or there's just money coming in, like, without me doing anything, but somewhere a part of me freaks out. I'm like, but I'm not going to belong in my own business anymore. Like, it's hard to navigate, or it's challenging to navigate that. And a part of that navigation is being aware enough to be able to see it.
I had the similar, for me, it was actually, I don't normally talk about this, but I will. For me, something I really, really struggled with was that sense of free range humans would be people who had external success in some way, but really didn't feel like they fitted. And then they want something different. And I always felt that it was more about being, scrappy and working things out. And so I wouldn't put really good photos of myself out. And I'm someone who is super visual. I happen to be ridiculously photogenic, as it turns out. It's a thing I have. And I now say it very publicly. And I was really scared of that. I was scared of looking too shiny. And now something has shifted in the last few years. And I'm like, fuck it. Me in 10, 20 years' time is going to kick myself for not actually showing my face and showing who I am, because I think I'll be too much. And at the beginning, I thought my words were the only thing I would let out. Me on video, me in photos, I wouldn't let myself be there without apologizing, without doing that thing we do as women of saying, oh, well, bad hair day. I'm like, no. We don't get to do that this time. And so my struggle was almost like the opposite. What if I'm too much? What if I come across as too shiny, too this? And I'm like, well, guess what? I'm going to use my power for good. And so in the second, one big change in the second edition of the book was I actually have a new chapter called The What If I'm Not a Shiny Haired Super Confident Entrepreneur. And I can write that because a lot of people see me as a shiny-haired, super confident entrepreneur. And so I'm like, that is more powerful, because coming from someone who isn't writing it because they're not that, they're writing it because they are that, and therefore they have a platform and they can talk to others about it. And so that's the difference. And before I was like, I'm either that one thing or I'm the other thing. And I'm like, no, I get entry into the world and I will use that. And I think that is, no matter what your form of that is, I think that's, I always see, for example, people in the wellness world who feel too normal. I'm like, you have entry into both worlds. Use your entry points. And it can feel really scary because it means you will never be fully accepted by both worlds.
Yeah, and there's something about this beautiful dynamic of writing for your audience but not writing for your audience, because I remember hearing people within my
within my like 100 top fans, or like, you know, the people that would do anything for me, and then them saying, you know, one of the reasons I love you is because you don't earn 7 figures and you're not standing in front of the Eiffel Tower showing off with Prosecco and la la la. And so there's a part of me that then for a little while was like, oh, but they won't love me if I'm shiny. They like, I'm supposed to be the alternative to shiny.
Yep.
These days it's like, hey, I am full spectrum and I encompass both. So yes, I will show up with no makeup on. I'm quite happy in my own skin with no makeup on in a hoodie. I'm also really happy, fully made up to the nines with like 6 cameras following me around. That is what we're available for. Like I'm available for spectrum, and I want you to have that full range human part of it. Like to me, it's like the wonderful nuance of free range is because that we have that free range as well as being able to go anywhere. You're also able to live into the full spectrum that's available to you.
And I think the key, right, I love all of this, and I think the key within that, I think where we can lose, well, I've seen people lose themselves in that, is where they don't know what their thing is within that. Who are you within that? Because if you're trying to be everything, you end up being nothing. But, you know, you and I, you, for example, you know what you're bringing and you're expressing that in a lot of ways. I think that's a really key difference. You know the thing that you are bringing, know your power place, know the thing that you bring to the table. And then if you're going to express that in 4 ways, great. That, I think, is the difference. And for me, one of the key themes that I've identified that I bring in my book and everything I do is this sense of showing up as you, making the most of your personality and your edge and your differences. And so that's what I bring in every like quirky picture or piece of writing or conversation. And then that ties the whole thing together.
I love that so much. And actually it's a really perfect place for us to tell people where they can come find you, where they can get the book, what a wonderful Christmas present it would make, you know, all of those things. So we're going to put all the links in the show notes, but where's the best place for them to come and find you?
You can check out the Free Range Humans website, free-range-humans.com. You can see shiny photos on Instagram at Free Range Marianne, but see my stories because I play a lot more in there. But seriously, if you want to check out the book and make sure you're getting the 2nd edition, which is way more awesome, go to beafreerangehuman.com and you'll get directed to what is definitely the 2nd edition on Amazon or wherever you want to get it from.
Fantastic. As I said, we'll make sure all of that goes in, so it's just really easy for people to find and to click through. Will you end on a I'm an adult but with me?
Yes.
It's that simple. Make you go
I'm an adult. Oh my God, this is so good. I'm an adult, but I'm really bad at putting myself to bed on time.
Oh, you and me both. Yeah, okay, so today's one for me is like, I'm an adult, but the amount of tantrums I want to throw a day is kind of the same as a 3-year-old right now.
Yep.
I mean, I don't always, you know, because I'm an adult. But I really wish I could.
I have so many. I'll give you one. I'm actually literally looking at it right now as we're talking. I'm an adult, but one of my favorite things in the world to do is get a big canvas and a bunch of acrylic paints and just paint, not paint anything representational, but just paint and make a mess.
I love that. You're going to have to send me a photo.
It's quite pretty if you like messes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me. It's been a real fun to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I loved it.
This has been Adulting with Ebony. I've been Ebony. You've been great. Thank you so much for all of your support. Please keep listening, liking, rating and sharing so that more people can enjoy and engage with us. If you want even more of me, and more importantly, even more of you in your world, take the next step. Become a patron, a Maven Haven member, get your free human design chart and report, or your compass, aka the value filter, to begin your glow up. Go to www.ebonyallard.com/welcome for more, and I will see you next time.